Breaking the Silence, Mental Health Conversations, with your hosts, Kim Olver and Dr. Richard Doss. Together, we'll break the silence and challenge the stigma by speaking now. So, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's dive in. It's time to start the conversation.
Good afternoon, Kim.
Good afternoon.
I have been having some really interesting conversations with some of my clients lately. And one of the conversations that I've been having has been around anger. And one of the questions that's come up that I thought we might talk a little bit about today is when people get into arguments, disagreements, verbal fights, who determines what the boundaries are? When, where, and how do we determine how far we can go when we get angry? So that's the question that I start with, and I have some thoughts. But I have a couple who have struggled. Really struggled. So I was sharing this conversation with one of my groups, and one of the veterans said, "Yeah, I got a buddy. Him and his wife and his adult son were on a trip, and they got down near Memphis. They were from Illinois. They got down near Memphis and got into an argument at Walmart, and he went out to the RV that they were traveling in and left."
Oh my.
And I said, "Well, did he go around the corner and come back?" And the veteran said, "No, he went home."
Home to Chicago?
Home to Chicago, and left his wife and adult son. So the question that came up for me, and I have a similar story with a couple that I'm working with. How far is too far? I don't know if I even really care how angry you are.
Well, Memphis to Chicago is too far in my book.
Okay, so let's start with just the sense of boundaries and ground rules, and how do we determine what's appropriate in expressing our anger?
So I think one of the key words that you said was ground rules, and that implies that they're discussed and decided upon when people aren't in anger. So you have some sense of what is okay, what's not okay with each other before you start in an argument. So knowing ahead of time is a big part of that. In the moment of anger, you might forget about those guidelines that you set forth. But that's the other thing you want to do ahead of time is how do we guide each other back to calm when we're jacked up? Because if I'm mad at you and you say, "Remember, you weren't going to talk about that," that just might make me double down and get even angrier because now you're correcting and policing me. So I'm not sure. What I think about is helping people understand anger and what it is, and recognizing that what happens and what's said in an argument is usually not as much about you as it is about the person who's lashing out, and not taking it so personally. Trying to understand from the other person's point of view what they're really trying to say. Because a lot of times in anger, our cerebral cortex is basically non-functioning, so we're not saying what we normally would say. Our more base animal instinct has taken over, and sometimes all we want to do is hurt the other person.
So if I'm angry at you, is hitting you going too far?
In my world, that's definitely too far. One of my non-negotiables in any relationship I'm in is if you raise your hand in anger to me, the relationship is over. And I'm really serious about that. But that's a personal choice of mine. Some people are, I won't say they're okay with that. Nobody's okay with that. But they may be more understanding and accepting of that. I think it's important to know what your own personal non-negotiables are, because if you give in on your non-negotiables, then they're not non-negotiables, and you find you lose yourself in that relationship, and you become codependent, and you put up with things that you never intended to put up with. So staying true to your non-negotiables, and I think you probably should only have 3 to 5 at the most non-negotiables in a relationship, because otherwise, if you have 26 non-negotiables and everybody has to, check off, you don't check any of the non-negotiables before you'll be in a relationship with that person. You might spend the rest of your life alone.
Well, I think a part of my fear is that we don't have these difficult conversations before we get into the relationship. And so sometimes I may not actually know what my non-negotiables are. I may not really understand and appreciate that I don't like getting hit until you hit me. And I realize we have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I remember early on in my dating life, I used to date a woman who wanted to play fight. I don't even want you to play like it's okay to hit me, right? Because I don't ever want to be in a position where I feel like it's okay to hit you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever want to be in a position where it's okay for you to curse me and call me out my name. And you also feel like it's okay for me to curse you and call you out of your name. So when do you have the conversations about what, and this is how I kind of think about it, what's cool and what's not cool? What we gonna do and what we ain't gonna do. And, as I think about the story that I started with, if we're in an argument at Walmart in Memphis, Tennessee, it's not okay for you to go out and get into the RV that we're traveling in and to go back home and leave me and think that's okay. And then, the other thing that sometimes people do, they'll justify it. Well, I just did that because I was mad. You shouldn't have made me mad. Man, we need to get some kind of ground rules. I don't care how mad you get. If I'm 500 miles away from home, you don't leave me standing on the street curb.
Without a suitcase, with nothing. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And did he stay that level of mad all the way home, those 500 miles? I mean, come on. There had to be a moment where he said, maybe I should turn around and go back.
Well, so that wasn't my client, but I can share a story of a client of mine that has a similar story. So obviously the names have been changed and the location that I'm about to share has been changed. Let's say that they were on a vacation to Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And they were staying in a hotel. And one of the things that the wife didn't like was for him to smoke marijuana around her. He had decided or discovered that he could go smoke marijuana at, because you can smoke marijuana in Denver,
Mm-hmm.
with one of her cousins, and they were going to go to a shop and partake. And she was like, oh, I want to go. And he was like, no, go ahead and stay. Well, make a long story short, she came along. And the first thing she did once they started smoking in front of her was talking about him and talking about the process and how he shouldn't be smoking weed and he shouldn't be smoking it in front of her. And so the evening went on and they didn't talk. At 5 o'clock in the morning, she was awakened by the sound of him putting his clothes into his suitcase. And she asked the question, where are you going? And he said, I'm going home. And home being Chicago. As she's laying there in the bed, and they weren't supposed to depart until Thursday. He had called a cab and was going to leave her laying in bed in Denver. And so the question, that I asked is, brother, was he cool to do that? And the statement that he made was disturbing. He said that when I am angry, I don't love anymore. I can't love and be angry at the same time. So it's either or. And so when I'm angry, I'm all in on angry. And you may as well be a stranger. And so you asked the question, so, was he halfway home by the time he realized what he had done was wrong? Did he realize by the time he got down to the taxi? Or had he been home for a week when he started thinking about, maybe what I did was wrong? And the challenging response that he gave me was that there was no point that he ever thought that the action that he had taken was wrong. And so he and his wife are sitting in counseling with me, and her tears are flowing. And I'm really asking the question, what are the ground rules? Where are the boundaries? Where do we set the limits on the stuff you can do to me and say to me that'll leave us in a place where we are respectful and can recover from our disagreement?
Well, and there's another challenge, because what does respect look like to you may be completely different than what it looks like to me. So all of this requires conversation, and I would hope these are conversations that are happening before the marriage, but as you pointed out, the problem may not even occur until 6 months or a year into the marriage, so you don't even know to talk about it. But I think it's really important to have that conversation when you're not in an argument, because you can't have that kind of rational conversation when people are angry. Another thing I think is really important, and this goes to some of the work that I do, is helping people understand that no one has the power to make you angry. You are choosing anger for a purpose, and you may not be aware of what it is, but it might be, I'm going to choose this response to show you can't treat me that way. Or I'm going to be angry because I want to make sure you know I don't want you to ever do this again. There's some purpose behind that anger. It doesn't just happen to you. It's not just something that another person can turn a switch and make you angry. So when people understand, if they're open to the idea that they're not actually being made angry, they're choosing anger, and they figure out what it is that they're trying to communicate with their anger, they might be open to other ways of doing that that would be more effective and maintain the relationship in a healthy way.
One of the things I like to think about when I think about anger is you cannot eliminate anger. Anger is a natural human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot eliminate anger, but you can choose how you manage your anger. And so as you think about the limits, the extremes of what's okay and what's not okay, like I said, I think a lot of people don't really have the conversation of what are our boundaries. Is it all right to curse me when you're angry? Is it all right to hit me when you're angry? Is it all right to leave the house when you're angry? You hear some people say, the old idiom, you should never go to bed angry. So does that mean I stay up all night? Right. So, I don't know. So I don't know if idioms fix it as much as difficult conversations fix how we address our anger.
Yes, and I think that before that conversation happens, there needs to be an agreement that you're having the conversation as an attempt to strengthen the relationship, or that conversation could turn into anger and leaving of the house, or some kind of angry words exchange that you can't take back. Because when we have difficult conversations, we have to understand that we have two people who think differently. One thing's for sure, men and women think differently. And not all men think the same, and not all women think the same. So when you have one man, one woman, who are two completely different individuals, have chosen to build a life together, it's miraculous if they can go through a long period of time with no differences causing challenges in their relationship. Differences cause challenges. But if you can get curious about those differences and make your goal finding a solution that works for both of you, instead of you have to see this my way and do it my way, or the other person saying, no, you're wrong, you have to do it my way. Instead of that, because there's no winning in that, you have to look at, well, what do you think? Help me understand why you think that way and what's going through your mind. I'll tell you why I think the way I do, what's going through my mind. And if we can get the anger out of it, we can think better to come up with a solution that might work for both of us.
Here's something that I've heard, and maybe I can get your input on it. I've heard people say that you shouldn't get into a long-term committed relationship, or definitely not get married to somebody until you've seen them angry. What's your thought on...
I've not heard that, so that's interesting.
I have actually heard people say you don't see a person's true colors until they're angry. Yeah.
I think what you see when people are angry is their animalistic nature. That's what I think you see. And that manifests differently in different people. So if that's the measurement that you want to see before you make a commitment, then I think there's some wisdom in that. But I don't think that you're seeing the actual person. I think you're seeing a version. You're seeing the angry version of that person.
Well, so this is kind of how we hear it. We hear people say that when we meet one another, we meet one another's representative.
Right, it's true. And in the beginning of a relationship, that's always their very best selves. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so, how do we get to the point where, I'm comfortable enough where I can be myself, you're comfortable enough to be yourself? Because I feel like if I come in with, my list of items on the checklist that have to be, marked before we can get into a long-term committed relationship, if I tell you what's on the list, I'm giving you guidelines for how to interact with me. And so, I think it's kind of scary for me to tell you what I'm looking for, because it becomes too easy for you to give me that, as opposed to allowing you.
You mean in tricking that person to, I'm going to pretend to be the person you want. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, so, I want you to be you. And in the process of being you, I want you to get mad, get upset. I want to see you happy. I want to see you joyous. I want to see you celebrating. I want to see you disappointed. I want to see you being you. I want to see you being you. And I think anger is just one of those things. Here's another thing that I used to teach my daughter. I guess I teach my son too. Is that long before somebody's going to be angry with you or show you how they express anger with you, as we think about the mask that people wear, watch how they are with other people. Watch how they are with the person who cut them off in traffic. Watch how they treat the waitress or the waiter at the restaurant. more often than not, in my experience, people are going to show you who they are and how they are against other people long before they get to you.
Yeah, because they're trying to win you over, so they're only going to show you the best version of themselves. And it's so interesting when you said that, people showing you who you are. That's part of, my mental freedom program is the unconditional trust challenge. And understanding that every single person at any moment is doing the best they know to get what they want in that moment. And it's usually not personal towards you. They're not doing it to you. They're doing it for their own benefit. So when you recognize that, and if you believe in that like I do, and you see someone who's angry, I think, well, this is the best behavior they have to get what they want right now. And that gives you some clarity. That helps you see, first of all, what's the best behavior they have, and second of all, what is it that they want? And if what I want is to hurt you, that's important information to have. And the problem comes when we think it's a one-off, or we think, oh, they really didn't mean it, and we make excuses for people instead of saying, no, this is who this person has shown me they are. That's the best indicator of who they're going to be in the future. It doesn't mean people can't change. I'm a counselor, so of course I know people can change, but they don't usually change because their partner wants them to. They change when they recognize what they're doing isn't working for them, or they develop new skills to get what they want in a better way, or they change what they want and they've decided it's not my goal to hurt you anymore. My goal is to help us have a more committed, caring, and loving relationship with each other. That could happen, and you might wait a lifetime for that to happen. But in the meantime, understand that the person in front of you is exactly who they are. This is who they are. This is their best behavior. This is what they want. It's not about you. It's just the way that they're navigating the world. It helps you with clarity.
So let me tell you how I just heard that. It's not always that people are committed to the relationship as much as they are committed to getting what they want out of the relationship.
Yeah, I think that when you have, that's exactly why I say you have to have this conversation ahead of time, because when you're developing these, when you're having these difficult conversations, when you're developing your boundaries in those conversations, each individual needs to make the commitment that during the conversation, they're putting the relationship needs above their own individual needs. Most of the time, people do go through life thinking about what's best for themselves. If they have a committed, loving relationship that they've learned to prioritize, they know how to put the needs of the relationship above their own individual needs. And that's when those conversations can be really fruitful, is when you're saying, my individual needs in this conversation are not as important as our couple needs are. And that's how they process the information in those difficult conversations. Not what's best for me, but not what's best for you. It's what's best for our relationship.
And so I guess we'll bring it home with, once you left me on the side of the road in Memphis, Tennessee, and you've gone back home to Chicago in the RV, how can I remotely come to a point where I can forgive you for that?
Well, forgiveness has to be defined, because I think there's two ways to forgive.
I'm listening.
So forgive means, in one instance, it's okay, I understand, you're off the hook, we'll start again, or we'll just continue forward. That's like a pass for the person who committed the offense. The other kind of forgiveness, which is the one I'm more, I advocate for, is I recognize that you did the best you could in that moment to get what you want. I can't be mad at you for doing the best you could. I'm disappointed it was the best you had. I'm disappointed that what you needed was to get as far away from me as you could. And now I have the responsibility to decide what kind of relationship I want to have with you going forward. And it might be that I don't want to have a relationship with you going forward. It might be that I need to be separated from you for a while and figure things out. It might be that you really do want to forgive and start over again. But the forgiveness that I'm talking about is forgiving you for what you did, not giving you a pass to do it again, but saying, I know you did the best you could to get what you wanted in that moment. And in doing that, it takes away the judgment and it allows you to have some compassion and forgive for you, not for the other person. So when I ask people to forgive, it's about dumping the frustration, the anger, the resentment that they feel, because I'm very much aligned with that expression. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. When we're withholding forgiveness, we're killing ourselves, man. This bitterness, anger, frustration, resentment, it eats you alive from the inside out. So forgiveness for me is about the person who's holding the grudge more than it is the person who committed the offense. In doing that, it doesn't mean you turn your back and you let the person stab the knife in again. It means I see you now, and I trust that you're going to be the person who leaves me when you're angry. Now I have to decide what kind of relationship I want to have with you going forward.
Wow. This is a continuation of a conversation that we have been having about healthy relationships. And I think what Kim brought in today is not only do you think about healthy relationships, but man, if I decide to leave you, do I know what being healthy looks like as an individual? There are a lot of conversations that we haven't had. I think there are a lot of conversations that are yet to be had. And I think it's up to us to dig deeper, to find out what's important to us, what our values are, what our goals are, and what healthy looks like. The thing that looks healthy to me might not be healthy for Kim. The thing that looks healthy for Kim might not look healthy for me. And if we're in a relationship, you know, at some point, I think we need to have the conversation. Hey, babe, if our relationship was healthy, what would it look like?
So, Richard, I'd also like to ask the people who are listening to this, if there's a topic that they would want to hear us talk about, that they could put it in the comments, and we'll look and see if we've got some material to talk about what's important to our viewers.
Good. Here's from Kim Olver and Richard Doss, wishing you healthy relationships.
I just want to say, if you have any topics or areas that you would like Richard and I to focus on in future videos, just drop a comment here. Send us an email at the address that's on the screen.